Welcome to the Octopus Movement podcast, where we celebrate the unique minds and extraordinary potential of nonlinear thinkers. I'm your host for today, Dr. Janice Campbell, and we'll be exploring how the power of nonlinear thinking can transform the world. I'd like to introduce you to a fellow octopus and our guest today, Rick Clark, who is this is not everything he is, but here's the short list: a data modeler, a video producer, a brand ambassador, a charity trustee, and an atypical thinker and neurodiversity advocate. Hi, Rick. So glad I'm so happy we're finally getting a chance to talk. I mean, there's been these little messages back and forth, but this is nice. I'm happy about it. So just diving right in, I'm curious, going through your profile, data engineering, architecture, sport, accounting, baking, singing. How does this all weave together into what you're doing these days?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not the easiest to describe. I mean, I do have a day job, which is, data heavy. So I work for a very non-glamorous organization, house builders, and that's based in Edinburgh, where I'm from, but is a UK-wide business. But I'm also involved in a lot of voluntary work. So, for example, I run for a running club or track and field club, Edinburgh Athletic Club. I also am a welfare officer for them. So, in terms of like looking after the welfare of our athletes, there is a lot of volunteering that comes with that. So that's where the baking comes in. So because I do cross-country running, I do road running, and I also do track. I often bake for the other members in the club, just off my own back. But you can imagine if you're running 5 or 6 miles on a really cold, wet, muddy day, it's there's going to be a reward at the end. I mean, as it is, with the welfare part, I'm trying to make it more about kind of mental health, and also things being more open, a more diverse club, because we haven't always been most diverse club. I do a little bit of neurodiversity advocacy. I mean, I'm working I'm on this lived experience advisory panel for the Scottish Government's proposed legislation to help support people with learning difficulties and neurodivergent people.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, which is tabled for later this year to be debated upon. But there's about 30 of us who are on the panel who are a great kind of group of different people with different experiences. We've got transgender. We've got people with every single neurodivergent diagnosis. There are people who are with lots of different learning disabilities. People have had lots of mental health problems, but all strong people, candidates with great minds. I mean, yeah, it's incredible. And some of them are non-verbal, but they still are able to get their message out, and they're incredibly intelligent people, and completely have blown my mind, to be honest. Do a bit of videography and kind of video editing here and there. I haven't been doing so much of that lately, but and as you mentioned, I'm a trustee at an adoption agency, which is actually where we adopted our son through. They asked me if I wanted to become a trustee, and I was honored to accept. As it is, there's a lot of people, neurodivergent people especially, who are both in the care system and also in the justice system. I can't speak of the other trustees, but I suspect I might well be the only neurodivergent person on the trustee board. Or certainly one that is open about it. I identify with those people whose children are ultimately adopted. I understand, some of the things that they might have encountered. So it's as I say, it's a privilege, an honor, to both be on the board and also to be a parent who's adopted. So,
Yeah, no, that's great for them to have you there in that voice, kind of from both sides, from both parents and the kids. That's really wonderful. And you also mentioned that you were talking about wanting to make your sport facility more accessible to people with disabilities too.
Yeah, I mean, so the club I run for has produced a lot of athletes over the years. Some of them have been world champion, a couple of the last two world champions at 1500 meters have actually come from our club, Jake Whiteman and Josh Kerr. But they're very much the elite, and there are other clubs that cater for more people with disabilities, and perhaps we've just been a little bit slow on the uptake to kind of get involved with that. And I'm not just talking about Paralympians. I'm maybe talking about in terms of physically disabled, but people with more learning difficulties. We're certainly not doing very much of that, and I want to make that a possibility. I want to make that a real thing. I mean, it's often said that exercise can help people's mental health, but often exercise can be the most or the least accessible method of actually helping with that mental health, because it's intimidating. Because if people are amazing and you don't consider yourself to be that good, you might just not get involved. That's certainly something that I identify with. I mean, I was very much one of those kids that was picked last for years, but then one day I decided that I was better than I thought I was, or better than I thought I'd been, or whatever. So I started to make it a thing. I don't know. I don't even know how I did that, but that's the power of thought sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And I think also too, when it comes to things like doing sports, is that it's because it's often a competitive event. There's the intimidation of starting, because look at all those people that are better than me, and I'm going to be that person picked last again as an adult. That's why would I put myself in that situation? Yeah. As opposed to looking at it from just the joy of doing it, the joy of physically moving and being able to.
In the kind of Instagram obsessed society or social media society, where so many people post photographs and videos of themselves doing things perfectly, it must be very hard for young people today to their aspirations have actually, if they're going to go for it, the targets suddenly seem much higher. I think in reality, if you are just comparing yourself to your old self, you don't actually have to get a lot better to feel good about yourself. But there's so much pressure put on young people to be amazing that many of them can only see perfection as being the goal. And I would like to make it less about perfection if possible.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the best athletes in the world have always, that there's multiple stories of them talking about how they just compete against themselves. They don't pay attention to what everybody else is doing, but learning to be able to not care so much about what other people are thinking in a world with social media is insane. I mean, it's and that's why I think it's really important for, I hesitate to use the word ordinary, but non-glamorized people, top connected, knows everybody around the planet kind of folks to speak out about, or to be present on platforms like this, to be able to talk about what it's like to be a normal human being in there.
I mean, I certainly think of other founding members, and anytime that Perry announces this latest founding member, and I think, oh my goodness, look at this range of achievements and incredible prowess, and Yeah, I guess I'm just not at that end of the whatever, the end of the something. You know, I'm you know, very much more involved in the kind of grassroots and stuff. I mean, just you know, from another perspective, for years I probably had problems in terms of kind of learning, and I really struggled with you know, that kind of fixed mindset of I'm no good at this, well, I'll just give up, or I was so scared of failure, so I gave up. And it was really in the last few years that I've embraced or learned to embrace failure, and I have had to relearn that a number of times over the last few years. It's not like I always remember to embrace failure, but there are times when I get very frustrated by it. And but yet, as a father, I often tell my son Logan when he's getting frustrated that if you compare, he loves football, soccer, you know, and so you know he's got his heroes like Zinedine Zidane and Cristiano Ronaldo. And I explained that, you know, whilst they might well for every time they hit the ball, kick the ball, do something terribly clever, it might be absolutely incredibly dead on perfect that what everything they do. But you know, in order for them to become that good, most likely they weren't the best person in their group. You know, they quite possibly might have been middle of the road, and they would have also had to practice, you know, potentially millions of times, you know, and also completely made a hash of it, you know, hundreds of thousands of times, you know, before they started to be consistently much better. So you know, I mean, I'm not suggesting that he should, you know, be aiming to develop OCD or anything, but you know, I think there's nevertheless, you know, there is you know, I think a lot of things can be learned, and unfortunately, you know, a lot of people who have a natural ability may actually find it hard to learn, you know, so that when they have to then start learning how to do something better because they're not improving at the same rate as they were when they naturally picked up a skill or were very good at something, it's actually that much harder, and they're more likely to give up, you know, which is why often people who are really good when they're young don't necessarily, you know, stay in the sport or whatever it is they have to be doing. But,
yeah, it's that whole idea of like grit to keep coming back to it. Not even the OCD part, but just to keep coming back and trying it again and trying it again and getting a little bit better. And no, it's I too, when I went through several different pursuits growing up where, you know, if I didn't get it right the first time, I didn't want to do it because there were things that I could get right the first time pretty easily, you know. And so then I thought, oh, there's just no way. And it took me a long time to learn to fail and to appreciate failing, because otherwise you don't learn anything. No. And now I teach. And so I'm teaching people to fail all the time. And they're like, what do you mean you're teaching us to fail? I'm teaching you to fail so you learn things. You know, everybody, you know, I try to get people to speak up in class, and I'm like, please, somebody give me a wrong answer so we can talk about it. You know, if you give me the right answer, we're not going anywhere. You know, and so, but it's I think the back to the competitive piece as opposed to being present. I think part of what allows people to do that, to have that grit to keep returning to something, is being present in what they're doing and the experience of what they're doing, not shooting for, you know, this. I mean, yes, in the long run, you have this vision of where you want to get to, or this person you want to be like, but to be able to stay present and continue to enjoy what you're doing and be there for the love of it, and the challenge of it and the curiosity of it, rather than I want to get it there, you know. I think that's actually what helps people, in my imagination.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
You know, which is lovely. And so that's why it's even just more powerful that you're doing this work with your sports club, and also with the Scottish government, to allow people to really understand lived experience and how to help people.
I mean, I think everyone has their main kind of subjects that they're particularly interested in. I mean, right now, I see a lot of stuff, possibly in my kind of what they call your bell jar, on places like LinkedIn, where I see lots of really positive and interesting messages about being neurodivergent, for example, and then I see articles written by journalists saying, why are so many people being diagnosed with autism and ADHD? And the fact is that, probably because of the fact that there were more people with autism and ADHD than you previously realized. And there is certainly the data collection element of that has always been a challenge. I think there's definitely a lot of people who were not just in denial about it, but probably thought there was such a stigma attached that they didn't pursue an assessment, and just went through their lives getting frustrated that they operate a different way to everybody else, and they couldn't seem to get past that. I think also, I have some theories about why there are more people potentially in the world now with autism and ADHD, or I say in the world as in walking around in the world, because for many years, a lot of people with both mental health difficulties and autism, for example, would be institutionalized. Certainly in this country anyway. And often they would be institutionalized from quite a young age. And then that was it. They were never seen of again, heard of again, sorry. And then there's another part. I only have this anecdotally. I don't have the statistics to prove this, but I believe there are statistics out there that there are a lot of neurodivergent people in both the emergency services and the armed forces. Now, I do know that some of the intelligence services, shall we say, apparently like to recruit dyslexic people, and with this idea of the fact that dyslexic people might solve a problem differently from other people. But if you can ever imagine, sorry, my computer's just unplugged itself. If you can ever imagine that at some point, somebody in the war, say that a war, they realized that one way of getting behind enemy lines was to create a parachute and jump out of a plane. I don't know. I've got a sneaking feeling that probably one of the first people that ever jumped in a parachute may have had ADHD. Might have had some impulse control problems. Was prepared to go for the dopamine hit of jumping out of a plane, and perhaps did it repeatedly. Also, these same people might well have been the one that saved their entire platoon from massacre or whatever, and then lost their life. And and I'm not trying to say that. I definitely am not saying that it's all men, because we know that that being neurodivergent is not a male thing. It's an everyone thing. But if you can imagine that there were two pretty big wars that involved quite a lot of countries in the world, and during the last century, a lot of men died in them. Some of them would have been going over the top of the trenches and getting blown to smithereens. So of course they never came back and then fathered children. Right. So of course then generations of neurodivergent people weren't born, potentially. Anyway, it's just a theory, but I feel like there's more of us in the world now, and that's exciting.
Well, and for me, excuse me, for me, one of the things I love about the Octopus Movement is it's non-linear. So that's you got a diagnosis or not, you have a neurodivergence or not, but you know how to crawl out of the box and look at the world in different angles, and so that whole just variety of humanity that is, and how we don't. I think part of it too is that our culture the global culture, not everywhere obviously, but the global culture has been tilting in recent decades towards creative thought and not traditional ways of doing business or ways of, we're starting or slowly getting into that with education. I wish we would get into it faster. And so I think that's also encouraging people who are not neurodiverse to like awaken their latent nonlinearity brain, because I think we're all born with that capacity. I mean, I will say, because I say in every podcast, I've never met a linear 2-year-old. They just don't happen.
No, that's right.
And so I think I think that's also part of it, is that the people that were that they're folks that are allowing that part of themselves to become more present, and then in doing that, they're also the people that may have been masking for half a century, that didn't know until their child or their grandchild or whoever got diagnosed and went, oh, wait a minute, I thought they were just like me. I might have to think about this for a minute, Right. And so I think that's also contributing to this, what looks like a surge, where it's just, it's a little bit like, the LGBTQIA community coming, once they weren't afraid of being killed or ostracized or, not allowed to, live in a house, or whatever it is, then it looked like suddenly there were more people, but they'd always been there. They just, they weren't comfortable being known. And unfortunately, there's still places in the world where all of these populations are still not comfortable being known. And that's part of the work, I think.
Terrible. I mean, fun enough, I have a mentor, like a data engineering mentor, and he is in his early 50s, and he was diagnosed with autism 2 or 3 years ago, and I met him at a late diagnosed kind of support class kind of thing that we went to, and but interestingly, he's just come out as bisexual, because he has essentially been masking that for his entire life, and so we just had Pride Week or something in Scotland or whatever, so he was involved in that, and he said it's just it just suddenly feels so much better. But I think that sometimes if you've been masking, as you say, for so long, it's when you unmask yourself, then you can become much more open to a lot of things, so I'm not just talking about your sexual preference, just
anything. Well, and also, I mean, then you begin to be able to see and ping off of people that are like you, or that are accepting of people like you, and suddenly it's like, oh, I am not out here all alone in the world, which is, again, back to the Octopus Movement, the lovely refuge for all of us.
Well, I have another school friend, like from high school, and when we were at high school, we did a lot of the same classes, but we didn't get on terribly well. And she was head girl, actually, and she went to Oxford University, and anyway, later on, she has the same 2 diagnoses that I have, so ADHD and autistic. And actually, it's funny because we got on really well now, and we're going to see each other in October, because we've got a school reunion, which could be fun. I don't know, but anyway, she made the point that when we were growing up, we didn't get on terribly well because we were both masking, to each other. It's ridiculous, because you just, unless somebody had ever shone a light in that direction, we just didn't know.
Well, and on some level, it may also have been, I can't get close to you because you might actually see what's going on over here.
Maybe.
Then my cover will be blown.
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's good.
Because so how do you, with the Octopus Movement, I mean, obviously we're at the Octopus Movement podcast, but how do you see this opening up of human possibility, working within what we're hoping to do with the Octopus Movement?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit that I've been a bit more quiet in terms of my activity, and not going to go into that, but what I was mentioning about my involvement with Scottish government, one of the areas that I'm particularly interested in, and also find very frustrating, is that there's a lot of neurodivergent people who are not in work, for example, who struggle to be employable, or to be taken seriously in the employment market. In terms of like going back to 2020 and even slightly before then, I didn't really know too many people who might have described themselves as having ADHD or whatever. And I was scared to get out there. And then I started getting out there, and I just started to meet people, especially in 2020 when many of us were locked down in our homes. I say getting out there. I was getting out there online and speaking to more people, which is obviously what Perry was doing. And when I guess I spent a lot of time Googling a lot of things, and eventually somehow must have come upon the Octopus Movement. And I certainly was more involved, and I hope to be again. I don't know the answer.
I will say this: our both of us are involved in the Ambassadors Project.
Yes,
the Octopus Movement, and you are our ambassador in Scotland.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening who would like to have a cup of tea with Rick, reach out to him, and he can tell you more about the Octopus Movement, because the interesting thing about how that's evolving is that I kind of became tasked with organizing it a bit because of my first career as a theatrical stage manager. So I'm used to wrangling a lot of people wandering in different directions. And I said from the get-go, we're not creating an Octopus Rotary Club. No. This is not like everybody shows up at a specific time on a specific day of the specific month, and everybody does a presentation with slides and does it. We're not doing that. It's more about connecting people in a much more organic way and a much more more natural way of connecting, and whatever natural means to them. And so we have ambassadors that are thinking in terms of large events, and then we have ambassadors thinking in terms of cups of tea. Personally, I like the cups of tea part. And so it's but allowing for more communication, more networking, more not even networking, but more actual genuine connection to happen in person is the goal. So it's not just about joining the Octopus Movement as an online entity, although there is a lot happening there. It is also about creating connections in 3D life, as I say, that will allow us all to belong more wherever we are.
I mean, I certainly know some people that might not actually describe themselves as being, multi-potentialites, but are involved in lots of different things, and also, but it's sometimes hard to approach people directly unless they want to come to you. If you see what I mean. I mean, it's not like Scotland is, bereft of thinkers. I mean, I think the TV was invented by a Scotsman, John Logie Baird, and I'm pretty sure the telephone was. They're two kind of quite critical inventions that everybody now uses. So.
About communication, nonetheless. In fact, so I suddenly realized what time it is. We could go on for quite a while. I think we need to make another off-camera chat. Yeah. Sure. But thank you so much for sharing your insight and your humanity and the projects you're working on and all of that. It's wonderful to know that that's happening somewhere in the world.
Yeah.
And how can people get in touch with you?
Well,
now that I've told them to go have tea with you, how can they get in touch with you?
What is my email address? Is it Scotland at
at the octopusmovement.org.
.org. There you go. Yes. But I'm also on LinkedIn and probably a couple of other areas.
Well, if they're here, I think there's a link in your name.
Cool. So,
And if you have any other questions, you can also reach out to me about learning more about the Octopus Movement. And just remember, we all began life out of the box. Embrace your inner octopus. Join the movement. Come on, it'll be fun. And then we can grow into a much more connected and belonging future. Take care. Thank you, Rick, so much. I'm very honored. All right.
Thank you.